Thank you. Uh, all right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today. So I am Yara Marin, and I'm the Interior West Regional Director here at Vote Solar. I use she, her pronouns. And Vote Solar is a national advocacy nonprofit organization that fights for 100% clean energy future at the state and local level through legislative and regulatory arenas.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sandy Barr. I'm the chapter director for Sierra Club in Arizona, the Grand Canyon chapter. I use she, her pronouns, and I live in central Phoenix on traditional lands of the Accomal, Atam, and Pipash. And Sierra Club works on a broad range of environmental issues, including at the Capitol, but our number one priority is addressing the climate crisis. All right.
All right, so we have quite a few things to discuss today. Some of the things we will cover are how climate change particularly impacts Arizonans and Arizona. We're going to dive into a few energy and electrical vehicle bills and share ways that you can all get involved. And we will also have some time for a Q&A at the end. So like Sandy did mention at the beginning, feel free to put your questions in the chat box and we will discuss them towards the end of this presentation. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I was looking for the, I was trying to mute myself. So anyway, let me go ahead and advance the slide now.
All right, thank you. So all right, so let's start with Arizona and how climate change directly impacts us all. So I don't know about you all, but I can absolutely feel our summers getting way hotter and staying that way for a longer, right? And so according to States at Risk, Arizona is one of the fastest warming states in the country. And as a result, we're also seeing an increase in the number of dangerous heat days. And we're actually expected to increase from 50 to 80 dangerous heat days by the time we reach 2050. And in addition to the heat and the wildfires, Arizona is also facing an immense water crisis. And as we enter our 26th year of a long-term drought, both widespread drought in Arizona is expected to triple by 2050. And so this is just really emphasizes the need for investments in better water management and climate resilience. And then I think really want to address, right, that climate change and pollution affects all of us, but communities of color disproportionately burden the negative impacts. And so these communities are more likely than not to live by pollution sites and waste processing plants, which increase their probability to suffer from conditions like asthma and other respiratory issues. And as a result, BIPOC communities have also been experiencing higher levels of COVID-related deaths in the last few years.
Great. Thanks, Yara. Despite the fact that Arizona is really on the front lines of the climate crisis, we have seen the Arizona legislature and the governor pretty much ignore it. Governor Ducey avoids saying the words climate change, and his policies for the last 7 years have done little to, if anything, to advance actions on climate or really look at making Arizona more resilient to what we're already seeing, the extensive drought, the extreme heat, and the larger wildfires. What we did this session before the legislature started is we put together some priorities for both the governor and the legislature. And one of those is to develop better climate resiliency planning and to specifically develop a climate resiliency plan for our state. There will be a bill, it hasn't been introduced yet, that sets up a process for putting together a plan. We also obviously want them to support bills to increase investments in clean energy, and at a minimum not to hinder actions at the Corporation Commission or at the local level, where we've seen quite a lot of action relative to the climate crisis. Stronger investments in transportation electrification, which we're going to talk a little bit more about here in a minute. And that includes electrifying buses for our schools and transit. We also know that energy efficiency is a huge and very important part of the energy puzzle that often gets ignored. I think sealing ducts and making our homes and businesses more efficient, maybe it just doesn't lend itself as well to visuals, but energy efficiency is our cheapest and our cleanest energy resource, and we want to see more investment there as well. And then we do want state agencies to both be allowed and directed to work collaboratively on climate action planning.
Thank you, Sandy. So now we're going to cover a little bit about the benefits of transportation electrification and just electrical vehicles. I think at first I want to really note, right, that transportation is actually the #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions in the country, and #2 here in Arizona. I think we really tend to focus on coal plants and fossil fuels, which is of course still very important, but we also need to increase our focus on the transportation sector. So greenhouse gas emissions from transportation primarily come from burning fossil fuel from our cars, trucks, trains, planes. And not only does investing in transportation electrification and charging infrastructure help to really promote greater energy efficiency, but transitioning from gasoline to electric vehicles is arguably one of the most impactful ways to really reduce emissions in Arizona, while at the same time saving Arizonans money and reducing some of those many health impacts that we covered in the slides before. And as electric vehicle infrastructure and distributed energy resource deployment increases in Arizona, so will the workforce, right? We need to, as we invest into transportation electrification, we also need to invest into workforce development and ensure that we can provide education and training for the highly skilled workforce that comes with that transition. I guess a few other fun facts are that electrical vehicles cost less. In addition to not needing to buy fuel, electric cars also don't need oil changes and require less servicing than cars with internal combustion engines. So this saves money on maintenance. And then lastly, electric cars really help us address carbon pollution, which we know is bad for our climate, for our state, and for our health. And it really threatens, right, our home here in Arizona. And so, like we mentioned in the first slide, we're already seeing hotter and longer summers and droughts. And so if we don't do something about it, climate change will continue to hurt our health and our economy. Thank you.
Thanks, Yara. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the electric vehicle bills that have been introduced at the legislature. This looks like a pretty good list of bills, and it is, but I will tell you that most of these bills have been introduced by Democrats, and so that means that a number of them won't be heard, and then some of them, well, and I think it will be challenging to get them through, but that doesn't mean that it's not possible. And a few of these bills will actually be heard on Monday in the Senate Transportation Committee. And so, so we know at least some of them will get a hearing. So that's positive news. So House Bill 2303 is a bill that has been introduced by Representative D'Alessandro, and then 2422 introduced by Representative Epstein. These bills look to be exactly the same to me. I didn't do like an exact side-by-side comparison, but I read through them, and they seems like they introduced the same bill. So they appropriate $1 million, and the grants are for any difference in upfront costs to government entities between electric vehicles and conventional internal combustion engine vehicle. So a good idea. We'll see if one of those bills moves forward, but so far they're not scheduled for a hearing. 2403 appropriates money for school buses. It would go for grants to schools for EV buses. 11, and again, that's a Democratic bill. One of the new representatives, Representative Solario, is the sponsor of that. Senate Bill 1150, this is one of the bills that will be heard next week, and it establishes a pilot program for electric vehicles and appropriates $500,000. It also requires that cities and counties have building codes that require the appropriate infrastructure for charging EVs, so they at least have some type of capacity for charging the EVs. So that's in that, even though that's not really part of the pilot program, but it is in there. And then there's a charging station pilot program as well that would be administered by the Arizona Department of Administration that again appropriates $500,000 for that to help pay for charging stations. That bill also allows for private entities to have charging stations at places like the state capitol, for example. 1152 requires agencies to prioritize buying zero emissions vehicles when they're looking at acquiring new vehicles. 1153 requires the state fleet to move to be a zero emissions vehicle fleet. I forgot to put the description of that one in there. And then 1154 is a study committee on transportation electrification. They have to go through and review the laws and make recommendations for how we can do better to promote electric vehicles. And then the last bill, 1246, is provides a mechanism for expediting procurement of EV buses by schools, so they can establish like a preferred contractor, and that will make it faster for them to be able to acquire EV buses. The ones that are scheduled for Monday are 1150, 1151, 1152, and 1154. So those will be on the agenda for Monday. These other bills haven't been scheduled for a hearing yet, although some of them were just introduced. And then I'll also talk a little bit about some of the energy related bills. Again, you know, at a time when we should be moving forward and doing more on addressing climate change and promoting clean energy, our legislature still seems to be living in the past and hitching its wagon to fossil fuels in many cases. And unfortunately, some of these bills help to demonstrate that. One I find particularly egregious is Senator Rogers' bill 1132 on municipal bonds. And it basically prohibits cities from bonding to do any kind of climate mitigation. And that would include things like investing in electric vehicles, unless the city said they were getting the electric vehicles merely for to reduce air pollution. And then I think they probably could still do it, especially if they made a health argument. But it could affect a lot of other actions and is a direct preemption of local government. The Representative Griffin is trying to establish more credentials for corporation commissioners. I think to make it so the commission is less friendly, if you will, to clean energy and to having what I would say would be more regular people, maybe like me, although I'm not planning to run. And then they're trying to restrict the Arizona Corporation Commission's rulemaking authority and making it subject to the same process as agencies, which means they have to go through the Governor's Regulatory Review Council. And the Governor's Regulatory Review Council is not really looking out for consumers. They don't really have any kind of clean energy mandate. Their focus is how is this going to affect businesses? And so a way to perhaps kill some really good energy rules, like the clean energy rules that we've been trying to promote at the Corporation Commission. And then 2101 is deletes the retail competition for electricity provisions in the law. Did include a bad policy statement. They have changed that, but there is still some negotiating going on with this bill. And the three large electric utilities are pushing 2101. And then the folks at Green Mountain Energy and some other entities are opposing it. We opposed it in committee, and we're looking to see what they're going to do with it going forward to decide how what we're going to do on that bill. And then 2042 puts biomass energy in the hands of the Department of Forestry and Fire Management, which could be unconstitutional because the Corporation Commission is the entity that that regulates those relative to energy. The Forestry Department could help promote biomass, but regulating it is not within their purview. I will, full disclosure, Sierra Club opposes biomass electricity. It can emit more carbon emissions even than some coal plants, and is seldom carbon neutral the way it has been characterized in a number of places. And I'm happy to provide more information on that if you would like it. And I think that covers those the main bills. Also, if you need more information on the Corporation Commission, let me know. I realized we didn't provide much of a background on that entity, but it does have a special place in the law relative to regulating utilities, promoting or helping to facilitate clean energy if it chooses to do so. So just wanted to mention that, and I will stop there and go back to Yara.
Thank you, Sandy. So we are just going to talk about a few ways to get involved. So there is an opportunity to join us all at the for Environmental Day at the legislature. And this is at the Capitol on Wednesday, February 9th. I do also just want to reiterate that there will be precautions that are being taken to ensure that everyone feels safe. And there's also opportunities to engage virtually. We will be staying outside and also asking that everyone who does participate and who does attend wear masks at all times. But I will let Sandy add to that if I miss anything. Do you want to add to that, Sandy?
Oh, I think, yeah, we're definitely limiting any indoor stuff. And so far, a number of legislators have been willing to agree to come outside and meet, but if they're not, we're setting up Zoom meetings and such as well. And so going to be doing everything we can to keep it as safe for people. We'll try not to have people bunched up or anything. And, you know, as long as you're like, you know, a few feet away from people, like 6 or 8 feet, we'll say, you know, you would be welcome to take off your mask and catch a breath of fresh air for a bit. But if you're closer in, we are going to ask that everybody wear their masks, just because of the high, how contagious this variant of COVID is. So.
Thank you. So I did attach the link to register for Environmental Day at the legislature here in the chat. Another opportunity to get involved is to sign up so you can log into the AZ legislature website and provide feedback on bills by signing up to request to speak. And so you don't necessarily have to actually speak if you don't want to, or if you choose not to, but you can also hop on and click on buttons to support or oppose bills and provide any written comments. And so I will also attach a link in the chat. Civic Engagement Beyond Voting has a great training video, and you can watch it in this link here that I've provided in the chat. And then another opportunity is to sign up for legislative updates with Sierra Club. And I will also provide that link here in the chat. And Sierra Club and Sandy, they do a really great job of ensuring that there is up-to-date information and that we're keeping people updated with new and introduced bills and ways to get engaged, along with priorities. And that is also on the chat.
Great, thanks, Yara. All right, with that, I think we will go ahead and take your questions. Also, if you want to follow up with either Yara or me, our contact information is here, and we're happy to address any follow-up questions or additional information you may need.
I do also see a few questions in the chat. We can go down in order, Sandy, if you'd like.
Sure. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing though right now so I can see people, if that's okay.
So one of the questions in here asks, what is let's see. So what is number one in Arizona? What's the number one source that
of carbon emissions?
And yep.
Yeah, electricity generation. The power plants are still number one here. We still have quite a few coal plants. The only one unit at Cholla has retired. Obviously, Navajo Generating Station retiring reduced our carbon emissions by quite a bit. APS, well, actually APS, TEP and SRP customers get some electricity from the Four Corners power plant. That's a huge coal plant. It's actually in New Mexico. There's a Springerville generating station, which has the newest coal unit. SRP at Springerville 4 is the newest unit there. And the only unit that doesn't have a retirement date, Coronado generating station, and in southern Arizona, the Apache generating station still has one unit that's coal and one that's gas. And then we have a large number of gas plants as well. So yeah, that's still number one.
Thank you. Another question is, do any of the EV bills have support from Republicans? I can go ahead and get started, and Sandy, please feel free to add if I do miss anything. But for the most part, most of the bills that we reviewed do not have, are not sponsored or co-sponsored by any Republicans, except oh my gosh, I cannot remember the number. Let me see. So
I think it's 1246, isn't it?
yeah, so 1246 is actually sponsored by Rep. Boyer, Senator Boyer, and so that is led by a Republican. And then we do have the electrical vehicle bills, SB 1150 through 54, which are introduced by Senator Steele. She is hoping to try to have some Republican support or in those bills. But as of now, I think that's the only one that does have a Republican sponsorship.
Yeah, that's correct, Yara.
Perfect. David, I see that you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. In addition to the lobbying, I'm just wondering if there has been, or if you foresee, any larger like demonstrations of climate-focused groups, given the Republican intransigence on this. I'm just wondering, as a complementary strategy, if that is something that has been used or might be used this year.
Yeah, there are a lot of different groups that have been working in coalition to try to move the needle on addressing the climate crisis in Arizona. And some of them have been working more at the local level and trying to move things there. Where we have seen even we have seen a little bit of bipartisan movement at the local level. For example, the city of Mesa has a climate plan that they're working on. So that is a nudge in the right direction. As far as at the legislature itself, of course, during COVID, there weren't too many things down there. Well, we're still in COVID. What am I saying? But during the worst of it, we just in early January did a news conference with our coalition, and really focused a lot on climate in that news conference for the priorities that we think the governor and the legislature should be addressing. And then there have been a number of protests and demonstrations. A lot of the ones the last year were focused more on the Build Back Better Act in Congress, but still sending the message overall that we need to act now on climate.
Thank you. And I'm assuming, Yara, that in this, in this election year, there'll be a focus on trying to reach voters to get them to vote, pro-climate, even doing it in a nonpartisan way. Is that a reasonable assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think we want to ensure that voters and Arizonans have the tools and resources needed to, make a decision and participate in the democratic process.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, of course. So another question I see on here, Sandy, is regarding 2303 and 2422. Are cities eligible for these grants?
Yes, it's political subdivisions of the state. So yes.
So are there any bills that have anything to do with solar energy incentives? I have not seen anything come around solar energy incentives. Have you, Sandy?
Not yet. There may be one on, there may be one on, I think it's an energy efficiency one, but also has something about solar. And I just haven't had a chance to review it yet, but yeah, I don't know of any yet. But there were a bunch of bills that were dropped that we're still looking at, so there may be.
Yeah, and then we're still expecting other bills to continue to be introduced. So there is a possibility that something does come up around solar incentives.
And we do have tax credits that are on the books already for solar. It's $1,000, and then which only, sadly, that only helps people who, you know, are not filing, you know, the kind of the easy form, right? But the so there are some incentives in place already. And there is a law, by the way, just I always like to share this. There is a law that says HOAs are not supposed to block people from installing solar. I think HOAs have probably backed off a little bit from the early days when they were trying to block everybody, but I still sometimes get calls from people who have homeowners associations that are trying to block them.
And David, we will make sure to get you some more information around the AZ Corporation Commission and biomass energy provision. Thank you. All right, as we move down, Emily asked, any news or thoughts on lithium mining in conjunction with electric vehicles? Would this take place in Arizona, and how could we make it more environmentally friendly?
Yeah, that's definitely a big issue, Emily. And there are some proposals for lithium mines in Arizona. One of those mines Sierra Club has opposed because of its impact to sacred area for the Wallapai tribe. It's near the Big Sandy River, and that's one that we have objected to. There are some things that can mitigate the pressure. One of them is recycling, and we are starting to see a lot more battery recycling moving forward. For too long, we have been just disposing of electronics overall in landfills, and there's actually a professor at ASU that has looked at, I think he's calling it urban mining. I basically say, yeah, mine the landfills, right? But there is a lot that can be done there as well. And then, yeah, stronger regulation of mining is something that Sierra Club and others have advocated for a long time. The mining industry in overall in Arizona, whether it's copper, lithium, uranium, is pretty lightly regulated, and the requirements are not nearly as strong as they should be, especially for reclamation. So, and I know that there are some activities going on with looking at the chemistry of batteries in order to reduce the amount of lithium required. So.
And thank you. Robert also added a link with more information on the Big Sandy lithium project in Arizona in the chat. So the last question, I have two more questions. Are there any bills that support the Sierra Club or other environmental groups and environmental priorities?
Yes, absolutely. I would say some of these electric vehicle bills do, and there will be a bill. It hasn't been introduced yet, but that requires a climate resiliency plan. There are a number of bills that would move us in the right direction on water that are being introduced or have been introduced. I will say that most of the bills are sponsored by the minority party, and that does make it a lot more difficult to both get them heard and advance them at the legislature.
Thank you. Do we know when SB 1151 is going to be heard?
Well, we know the committee starts at 2 p.m. on Monday. Those bills are the main bills on that agenda. I think I might even have that agenda here somewhere. And so I can tell you that it will be like sometime after 2 on Monday. Yeah, those 4 EV bills are the electric vehicle bills are the only ones on the agenda. Oh, there's going to be a presentation on electric vehicles first. So that'll probably be like around 2, and then they'll get to the bills. And I would guess that they'll probably go in order. So, maybe sometime around, 2:30, they'll get to 1151. It's just a guess, but if you wanted to catch 1151, I would just encourage you to tune in right at 2 when they start, and you'll have a good chance of catching it within that next hour.
Thank you, Sandy. These are all great questions. Anything else we can answer? And you have all been really great about linking resources in the chat. So I would definitely encourage everyone to take a look and look through these links.
I can add too, if people want to hear even more about electric vehicles, next month the Sierra Club does have a presentation that Robert Bulacek, who is on here, will be presenting for our monthly meeting, and I can probably grab that information, or you can just actually go to the Sierra Club website and events and activities for Sierra Club's Grand Canyon chapter, and you will find that there. I think it's like the 24th, if I'm remembering it correctly. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining today. If you are participating in Environmental Day, or even if you're not, we do have some additional Zooms coming up on various issues, including on the State Parks Heritage Fund, on rivers, also on democracy, and then we will be setting one up just something a few days before Environmental Day, where we'll go over the key bills, and it'll be more of a discussion and an interactive type of activity. And we'll get that scheduled here in the next few days. So appreciate all your support and for your being here, and look forward to seeing you at the next Zoom or at Environmental Day or somewhere else in the virtual world, and one of these days in person.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely weekend.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.